Hi, everybody. I'm Vladimir Dutit. We are watching all the news happening in the United States and around the world. If it's happening on these monitors behind me, we're going to bring it to you live right here. Let's begin. We're 2 weeks from the election, and CBS News polling shows former President Donald Trump and Vice President Harris are in a tight race for the White House. We're tracking the movements of both campaigns. A high-stakes visit. Secretary of State Antony Blinken arrives in Israel for the 11th time since the start of the war in Gaza, hoping to stop the wars north and south of Israel's borders. And several students are in custody after a protest at the University of Minnesota as they call on the school to divest from companies that support Israel. How the university is responding. This is CBS News 24/7. But we begin this morning with the countdown to Election Day. Both the Trump and Harris campaigns are hitting those key battleground states to rally support all around the country. The campaign blitz is a key for both candidates. The CBS News Battleground Tracker currently has Trump and Harris tied specifically in the states of Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Now, all three of those states could be the deciding factor of the race. Let's bring in Nicole Killian with the latest on both campaigns. So, Nicole, let's begin with former President Donald Trump. He's stumping in hurricane-ravaged Florida and in also North Carolina. Early in-person voting is underway. What's the campaign strategy to the reporting that I see, Nicole, is that Donald Trump has a very, very strong base of support. His challenge is adding new supporters to his campaign.
Yeah, well, that's right, Vlad. I mean, we are here at Doral, the former president's property just outside of Miami, where he will hold a roundtable with Latino voters, which is quite a coveted demographic, certainly for both campaigns and both candidates. We have seen the former president do similar roundtables in other battlegrounds, most recently in Nevada as well. So that is part of his strategy for today. And then he's going back to North Carolina. I know you mentioned those blue wall states where the races are very close, but North Carolina is equally important to both candidates, but probably more so to the former president simply because he did win it in the last cycle and back in 2016, but he really wants to keep that state in his column, and the race there also remains very close. When he was there just yesterday, he spoke with evangelicals and faith leaders. He also held a news conference where he discussed some of the storm-related damage and also repeated some of those false claims with respect to hurricane aid and funding. But nonetheless, he will be back there tonight holding yet another rally before heading to Georgia later this week.
So, Nicole, you know this as well as I do. There's some recent fundraising data that shows that Vice President Harris has raised more than 3 times as much money as former President Trump. This is just for the month of September. Both are outspending those totals. The question is, how is she deploying all of that money? And does the Trump campaign see the funds raised as a disadvantage for them?
Well, he certainly has his fair share of backing, particularly from a lot of billionaire donors like Elon Musk. But with respect to the vice president, certainly having that fundraising advantage kind of does free her up from, at this juncture, having to go to more fundraisers and really double down and focus on campaigning and really trying to reach those key demographic groups that she is trying to keep in her column, whether that is Latino voters or African-American voters, and also this small sliver of the electorate that is still undecided and still persuadable. Again, that's also a very coveted group of voters for both campaigns, but obviously having the resources to deploy teams on the ground to canvass and to put up digital ads and the like, those are kind of those last-minute areas where any candidate can kind of use that fundraising to their advantage.
All right, Nicole Killian for us. Thank you, Nicole. Appreciate it. All right, let's turn now to developments out of the Middle East. Secretary of State Antony Blinken arrived in Tel Aviv this morning. He is meeting with Israeli officials on his first stop in the region to revive those stalled ceasefire talks. His arrival comes hours after Hezbollah fired a barrage of rockets into northern and central Israel. There are currently no reports of any casualties. Overnight, though, Israeli forces carried out more airstrikes across Lebanon. For more on this, I want to bring in CBS News foreign correspondent Ramy Inocencio, who is joining us from Tel Aviv. So, Ramy, we've been talking about the Secretary's visit and the potential, the prospect, perhaps, of a ceasefire deal. What are you hearing? I know those talks have stalled, but now you've had some critical roadblocks that have been taken out by Israeli airstrikes, including Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas. So what does that mean for these stalled ceasefire talks?
Yeah, Vlad, well, put it this way. This is Blinken's 11th time here to Israel in the past 12 months to try to find a way to a ceasefire. And the word that we continue to describe that ceasefire is elusive, right? The last time he was here was actually the last time I was here in August. And since then, as you mentioned, Israel has opened up a second front of fighting with Lebanon. Iran retaliated against Israel with about 200 missiles. We have been on standby expecting Israel to retaliate any day now before the elections, U.S. presidential elections where you are. And the heads of Hamas and Hezbollah, they are now dead. So a lot of quakes that have happened politically, militarily here. The situation is arguably much more tense, and the balance of power arguably seems to have shifted to Netanyahu's favor. So Blinken will meet Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Defense Secretary Yoav Gallant, and other officials today. Of course, we'll get further details. We don't have any details on those just yet. After Israel, he is expected on his itinerary to go to Jordan and Qatar, and he's expected to be here in the region through the end of this week.
So, as we reported, Ramy, earlier, Hezbollah launched this barrage of rockets into Israel, and we've now indicated that there are no reports of any casualties. That Iron Dome is so critical at this moment for Israel.
Yeah, absolutely. And an update, really, in the past hour, we continue to see rockets fly, rocket sirens sounding in northern Israel. The hour before that, more sirens went off in response to another threat, also in the north, in the upper Galilee area. This morning, we woke up to air raid alarms here in Tel Aviv. And I'll say that the last time I was here, we hardly heard one. But in the past week and a half or so, there's been one every 2-3 days or so. So definitely an increase in the frequency. Those sirens going off 7:45 a.m. or so. We heard the booms over us from the Iron Dome missile interceptors from our shelters inside our hotel. And that was just a couple hours, actually, before Blinken landed here. Israel's military said that Hezbollah fired about 20 projectiles just this morning. Again, northern Israel and central Israel this morning. Hezbollah says that it targeted multiple sites, including a battery for the Iron Dome near the city here, and that it bombed the base for a military intelligence unit. That's unit number 8200. And that's important because that unit, at least it's understood to be the unit responsible for those pager attacks and those walkie-talkie attacks on Hezbollah last month. Meanwhile, up in Lebanon, President Biden's special envoy, Amos Hochstein, is still there trying to work towards a peace between Israel and Hamas. So we're seeing this double front to try to push ahead on some kind of peace. But again, as we started out talking about this, that peace is and continues to be elusive.
All right, Ramy Inocencio for us in Tel Aviv. Thank you, Ramy. Appreciate it. Okay, President Biden says he is, quote, deeply concerned about the leak of an apparent Israeli attack plan for Iran. It outlines a retaliatory response to Iran's October first volley of nearly 200 missiles. White House National Security Advisor John Kirby said it's still unclear whether this is the result of a hack. One lawmaker raised the possibility of espionage. CBS News correspondent Natalie Brand is joining me now from the White House and has the very latest details on all of this. So Natalie, the president's reaction to these plans, according to Admiral Kirby, seems to be more about the leak of the documents themselves and less about the implication of a possible Israeli attack on Iran. What more can you tell us about the president's response?
Yeah, well, as Admiral Kirby noted yesterday, the president, the White House, is deeply concerned that these two highly classified documents were able to appear in the public domain, surfacing first on a Telegram channel online late last week, and then also making their way to X, to other social media platforms. These were just two top secret documents, what appear to be information about satellite analysis about the Israel's plans for retaliatory military strike against Iran. That's, of course, in response to Iran's massive October 1st ballistic missile attack. But at this point, what we know is that there's a huge investigation underway by the Department of Defense, by the intelligence community, the FBI finally confirming that early this week after it was very difficult to get any information about this over the weekend. And what John Kirby of the National Security Council indicated is that the president really wants to know how these documents became public, whether it was a leak or whether there was some sort of hack, what exactly led to these documents surfacing, and what can be done in the future moving forward to mitigate any further future disclosures like this.
Let me ask you about the president's trip, Natalie, to New Hampshire. He's set to meet there with voters to talk about lowering prescription drug costs alongside Vermont neighbor Senator Bernie Sanders. This is an issue that we've heard the pair speaking about a lot recently. What are they hoping to get out of this trip?
Well, what we're seeing really is President Biden trying to cement his legacy in his final couple months, several weeks in office, holding some official events, which also, you know, kind of take on a campaign type nature when you are touting your administration's, what you see is the key achievements, which would then be continued by his vice president if she is elected in November. But the Inflation Reduction Act, as we know, one of the very popular components, according to Democratic lawmakers and voters, if you talk to them, is the savings of prescription drug costs by Medicare recipients. The president is expected to give some details from a new HHS report, which shows nearly $1 billion in savings in the first half of 2024, according to HHS, based on this new ability by Medicare to negotiate directly with certain prescription drugs to bring down costs and also cap the costs of things like insulin. So we can really kind of see the president again touting some of what he views as his key achievements and also reminding voters of what's to come if his administration, the goals of his administration continues through his vice president, Vlad.
All right, Natalie Brand reporting from 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Thank you. All right, let's turn back to the Middle East. Of course, the controversy that has rocked college campuses here in the United States continues. Police at the University of Minnesota arrested 11 protesters demanding the school divest from companies that support Israel Monday afternoon. One student protester had this to say about it.
You are showing a bias if you're refusing to speak a word about what's happening to the Palestinians, but you are still sending money to Israel. You are picking a side. You are showing what side you land on.
School officials say the demonstrators stormed an administrative building on campus and barricaded themselves inside. There were no injuries reported. The executive director of Minnesota Hillel, a Jewish campus organization, shared the following statement, saying in part, quote, "We are in close communication with university administrators to ensure that they're doing everything possible to provide support and keep Jewish students safe." All right, let's switch gears completely now and bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore with the first look at the national forecast. Grant.
Good morning, Vlad. I'll tell you what, a good eastern half of the United States getting spoiled by this beautiful fall weather that many of you are enjoying. Some of you are tired of the warmth and you want a little bit cooler temperatures. Not the case from Tulsa to New York today. Temperatures in Tulsa, Oklahoma climbing up to 88 degrees. That would tie today's record high temperature. Even D.C. climbing up to 84 this afternoon. Philly, Rochester, Islip, all right there near record territory. Islip at 75, the record 77, so that might be hard to get to today. But still, overall, just fantastic weather, all compliments of this huge area of high pressure. Now, look, it's bringing some 90s to Texas, but it's taking the warmth from Texas and the Gulf of Mexico and just sending it all the way through the Midwestern states and then, of course, up into the Northeast as well. Look at this pipeline of warmth. 90 in Oklahoma City, 76 Detroit. There are those low 80s from places like New York up to Syracuse today. Lower 80s. It feels more like early September than late October. Those temperatures running 15 to 20 degrees above normal. We'll start to see more normal conditions arrive in places across the Ohio Valley and mid-Mississippi Valley as we go through the second half of the week. But overall, though, the great weather across the eastern half of the United States continues. Meanwhile, we do have a little rain across the northern tier states, cooler temperatures in the Pacific Northwest, and still tracking a named storm in the tropics. Vlad, we'll take a look at the tropics. We'll talk a little bit more about this heat, though, across the eastern half of the United States here coming up in just a bit. But for now, back to you.
All right, Grant, we'll check in with you just a bit later. Thanks so much. Russian President Vladimir Putin is hosting a gathering of world leaders for the BRICS Summit of Emerging Economies today. Coming up, we'll have the significance behind the summit amid the sanctions Russia faces from the West. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Russian President Vladimir Putin is hosting a gathering of world leaders for the BRICS Summit of Emerging Economies today. BRICS for those emerging economies. It comes amid Western sanctions and an international arrest warrant following Moscow's invasion of Ukraine in 2022. CBS News foreign correspondent Ian Lee is following the summit, and he joins us now from London to discuss. So, Ian, for people who may not know what BRICS stands for and what the summit is, why is it important for Vladimir Putin?
Hi, Vlad. Yeah, the BRICS, which stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, is presented as a counter to the Western-led world. In recent years, it's expanded to Egypt, Iran, Ethiopia, and the UAE. 20 world leaders in total are descending on the Russian city of Kazan for the summit. It's seen by the Kremlin as sending the message that attempts by the West to isolate President Vladimir Putin over his invasion of Ukraine have failed. Moscow is touting this as the largest foreign policy event the country has ever hosted. The Russian president hopes to use the summit to convince members to adopt an alternative to the dollar for global payments. BRICS nations account for 45% of the global population and about 28% of the world economy, and there is interest in other countries joining the group. Moscow claims about 30 want to join or seek closer ties. Vlad?
So, Ian, presumably Putin will be looking to project an image of unity among those BRIC members, but are you hearing that that's actually the case?
Yeah, so on a bilateral basis, there could be the forging of closer ties. For instance, Russia and India have long held close relations. But the larger the BRICS becomes, the more it appears less like its namesake and more like a house built out of straw. First off, there are countries in the club that have major rivalries. China and India have had deadly border clashes in recent years, although they've tried to play those down. But Beijing is also trying to push its influence into the Indian Ocean, which Delhi is concerned about. Then you have Egypt and Ethiopia. Tensions between those two countries have been growing over the use of Nile River water. Saudi Arabia is looking to potentially join, but it's had a violent rivalry with member Iran. Then there are countries that don't want to be antagonistic with the West, namely India, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia. So there are a lot of economic and political hurdles the club faces. So getting unison among the members, especially as it expands, will likely be more difficult. Vlad?
All right, Ian Lee reporting from London for us. Thank you, Ian. A convicted killer whose death sentence was stayed last week has been blocked from telling his story in person to the state legislature in Texas. Robert Robertson is challenging his conviction, disputing scientific testimony that blames his daughter's death on what is known as shaken baby syndrome. An autopsy found that she actually died from complications of pneumonia. CBS News correspondent Nikki Batiste is in Austin. That's the state capital. She's been covering this story from the very beginning. So, Nikki, break down these new developments for us. What was the purpose of Mr. Robertson's ability to testify in person?
So, Vlad, what we've really been seeing is a game of legal ping pong. So, a reminder that Robert Robertson's execution was delayed, essentially by a group of bipartisan state lawmakers who issued a subpoena for him to testify in a hearing about this Texas junk science law that takes a new look at shaken baby syndrome. So they wanted him to testify in person because he has since his conviction, been diagnosed with autism. So these state lawmakers and Robertson's lawyers say he is a man who has been diagnosed with autism, and he is a man who has been in prison for 21 years. He's never been on Zoom. He's not familiar with this technology. And those two reasons together make it vital that he testifies in person. That's really the only fair way to do this for him. The Attorney General's office said, no, we want this to be a virtual testimony. So as it stands, there's, as far as we know, still trying to work out whether Robert Robertson will testify, if he will be in person here in the Capitol, if the state lawmakers have said they'll go to the prison to talk with him in person if they have to. So we'll wait to see what happens. But there was still a hearing here yesterday for about 9 hours. We heard testimony. Among the witnesses was TV host Phil McGraw, author John Grisham, who both said that they both criticized the medical evaluation in this case, which you mentioned was initially deemed shaken baby syndrome, when in fact later an autopsy, according to Robertson's defense, showed she died from complications of pneumonia. So now we just wait to see what happens. As it stands, based on Texas law, a new execution date cannot be set. It has to be set after 90 days in the future, which means at the earliest, Robertson would die by lethal injection after the new year. And lastly, we finally yesterday, for the first time, heard from Texas Governor Greg Abbott, who criticized these state lawmakers, saying they stepped out of line and that this subpoena jeopardized his power as governor to grant clemency. Vlad?
All right, Nikki Batiste for us, reporting from Austin. Thank you, Nikki. The IDF is warning residents in southern Beirut to evacuate ahead of planned military operations against Hezbollah. We're monitoring the rising tensions in the Middle East. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Welcome back to CBS News 24/7. Here's a look at some of the top stories we're following for you. New Mexico's governor has signed a disaster declaration for Chavez County after the devastating flash flooding over the weekend that killed at least 2 people. The town of Roswell was quickly filled with rushing water after 6 inches of rain rapidly. Okay, the state's National Guard had to rescue more than 300 people from the flooding. Investigators in Houston are trying to determine what caused the helicopter crash that killed 4 people. The chopper struck a radio tower before plummeting to the ground. Our Houston affiliate reports the tower's lights were not working, and the FAA had put out a notification about it days prior. The NTSB says they are investigating, and it is in its early stages. And a disgraced movie mogul and convicted sex offender Harvey Weinstein has reportedly been diagnosed with a type of bone marrow cancer. Multiple reports say Weinstein is receiving treatment while behind bars at New York Rikers Island as he awaits a second trial on sex crime charges. A representative for Weinstein has not commented publicly. Weinstein has had a series of recent health issues and underwent heart surgery last month. Israel's army is warning people living in southern Beirut to evacuate ahead of military operations against Hezbollah. The terrorist group launched a barrage of rockets into central Israel today, setting off air raid sirens, and this comes as the death toll from a strike near Beirut Hospital rises. The exchange of fire is happening as U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is attempting to hold ceasefire talks with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. CBS News senior national correspondent Charlie D'Agata is following all of this from the Pentagon and joins me now to discuss. Charlie, we reported at the top of the hour that the secretary's visit is his 11th to Israel since the war in Gaza broke out. What is your assessment in talking to your sources at the Pentagon about a possibility of a ceasefire happening before the U.S. elections?
Well, they're not very optimistic. You know, the stated aim from the State Department about his visit was to try to jumpstart ceasefire talks with Hamas, even Hezbollah. But Vlad, they've been dead in the water for weeks. There's been no real progress. But with the death of Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar, that's presented as the White House and others have put it a unique moment, a change of leadership. And many have long blamed Sinwar himself as being the chief obstacle in the way of peace talks. And the return of the hostages, Americans among them. But as I said, hopes aren't high. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that the war against Hamas will continue. Our colleagues, Marwan, who has been saying that they've just been battering Gaza. under heavy bombardment in recent days from north to south. That's hampering aid that's going to civilians. And remember, Israel has been put on a 30-day notice to do more to feed civilians and provide that aid, or risk losing U.S. military aid. And for its part, Hamas have doubled down. They say there will not be any break in the fighting, that the Sinwar's death has only strengthened the organization, provided more solidarity, and they're refusing to release the hostages until Israeli forces pull out of Gaza. It's worth noting, too, we've got Hezbollah going on. The Secretary of State arrived just hours after a Hezbollah missile strike, or an attempted missile strike, as far south as Tel Aviv. Most of those missiles were intercepted. So he comes, and it's also, we're all waiting for the major Israeli retaliation against Iran. This is all happening at the same time.
All right, Charlie, let me switch gears and ask you about this investigation into the alleged leak of classified documents about Israel. What do we know about that?
Yeah, so DOD officials have confirmed to me this morning that the alleged leak or hack is being investigated by the U.S. government and appropriate authorities. They say, the FBI say they are leading the investigation. The Department of Defense say they're fully supporting these efforts. Now, in terms of damage control, they'll need to quickly plug that leak and determine its source to make sure more highly classified documents don't become public. As far as the documents themselves, and I've got a copy, alleged documents, I should say, they're not likely to have any real significant impact on Israeli plans to launch its retaliation. From what we've seen, it's really just more of a broad overview of Israeli preparations. Sort of drones and missiles have been positioned and repositioned. Some Israeli missiles have been dispersed, as they call it, to make it more difficult if Iran should counterattack. So there are no huge revelations here. And most of the analysis, it's worth noting too, again, just from these two sheets of paper, it's really based on intelligence, on surveillance rather than intelligence. And, Israel is well aware with that partnership that the United States is keeping a close eye on that region. So it won't come as a big surprise, but it may have an impact on diplomatic relations because, Israel has been less than forthcoming in terms of providing the U.S. with a heads up for major operations, and sometimes until they're well underway.
All right, Charlie D'Agata with the latest for us from the Pentagon this morning. Charlie, we appreciate you as always, my friend. Thank you.
Thanks, Vlad.
All right, let's talk about jury selection in the trial of that Marine veteran accused of putting a man in a fatal chokehold on a New York City subway. It continues today. CBS News New York's Christina Fan has the very latest from the courthouse. Christina, good morning.
Good morning. Daniel Penny's trial is expected to take up to 6 weeks. Jury selection alone could take until the end of this week. Once decided, a jury of 12 people will determine whether or not the Marine Corps veteran is guilty of manslaughter and criminally negligent homicide in the subway chokehold death of Jordan Neely. The deadly encounter, captured on video, happened in May of 2023 on a Manhattan subway train. Witnesses say Neely, a former street performer, struggling with drug addiction, homelessness, and mental illness, had been shouting, throwing things, and behaving erratically when Penny approached him, pinned him to the ground, and then placed him in a chokehold that lasted for several minutes. Attorneys for Penny have argued that the Marine veteran only intended to hold Neely down until police arrived, as he was concerned about the safety of others. But prosecutors argued in a court filing that Penny's actions were reckless and negligent, regardless of what his intentions were. Protests are planned for the duration of trial. If found guilty on both counts, Penny could spend up to 19 years behind bars. Reporting from Lower Manhattan, Christina Fan, CBS News, New York.
All right, Christina, thanks so much. We are following a developing story. Former CEO of Abercrombie, Mike Jeffries, is facing sex trafficking related charges following his arrest in West Palm Beach, Florida. Jeffries was chairman and CEO of the fashion brand from 1992 to 2014. Now, this criminal case comes a year after Abercrombie was sued for allegedly ignoring sexual misconduct by Jeffries. 2 other associates were also arrested in the case brought on by federal prosecutors. The FBI, NYPD, and U.S. Attorney's Office are expected to hold a press briefing later today. We'll obviously have it for you right here at CBS News 24/7. Meanwhile, U.S. migration is top of mind for voters as they head to the polls in the coming weeks. And our Omar Villafranca set off on a journey to hear from people living in border towns from Texas to California. He is driving. That is a view from his camera. He's driving nearly 1,700 miles, and he's doing that in just 1 week. Voters in small towns across Texas, Nevada, and Arizona spoke to him. Here is more of the story.
Good morning. Every time we're down here at the border, it's for some sort of crisis, a migrant surge, a big drug seizure, or elected officials coming to see the border and see what's going on here. But despite the rhetoric of cartel violence and drug seizures and migrant surges, most of the people that we've talked to so far tell us that they feel safe in these border communities, and they have a deep economic and cultural tie to Mexico. Now, we started our journey on Sunday in South Texas in Laredo. You may not know this, but last year Laredo was the #1 port of entry for commodities entering the United States. We're talking more than $300 billion worth of international goods on the back of a record year for U.S.-Mexican bilateral trade. Laredo's mayor also tells us the city doesn't really have a significant issue with migrants who are crossing into the U.S. illegally. Now, on Monday, we then drove to remote Presidio, Texas. A business owner there says his city and his business relies on workers who live in Mexico but then cross the border every day to come to work. Mayor says he's trying to beef up CBP presence, but not for the reason you may think. He wants more CBP inspectors there so they can check more goods coming over, because he wants more goods and products coming over that border, but he fears that the rhetoric is kind of having the opposite effect and scaring business away. We're going to continue our border journey. We're wrapping up here in Texas. We've already driven more than 800 miles. We're now heading to New Mexico, to Arizona, and to California to talk to residents in these border cities and let them tell people in Washington, D.C. and the next president what's working, what's not working, and what needs to be done. Vlad?
All right, Omar, nice job. Thank you very much. Let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore with another look at the national forecast. Grant.
Vlad, let's talk about elections. You know, we're getting closer to November. It just doesn't feel like it across most of the eastern half of the United States. Let me pull up the map here, and let me show you the wind speeds across the country here. And you look across the central part of the United States. See how those winds are coming in from the west. Well, you head up into the Midwest and to the Northeast. Those winds are really southwesterly, if not just westerly as well. But look at some of these forecast high temperatures, and let me put on the temperature contour on the map here, because it's some pretty big warmth for mid to late October. Places like Amarillo, 83 degrees, 89 degrees in Odessa. Walk with me. High pressure system centered over the eastern half of the United States, bringing all of this warmth to not just the Midwest, but all these places up towards the Northeast, the Mid-Atlantic. Temperatures in the upper 70s to lower 80s. Temperatures running a good 10 to 15 degrees warmer than normal. In fact, several places in the Northeast, mostly in New York City, but even places like Tulsa, Oklahoma, looking at record high temperatures for today. We'll start to see temperatures moderate a little bit as we go into the second half of the week. Tulsa, 88 degrees this afternoon. That would tie a record high temperature. D.C., 84, 83 degrees right here in Philadelphia. Rochester, New York at 83. Islip around 77 degrees, which would tie today's record high temperature. I mentioned that high pressure system parked right over the Appalachians. That's what's taking all of that warmth from the western Gulf of Mexico, the southern plains, and literally just funneling it up to the north and into the north and east, where those temperatures, you can see, it's just a string of 80s, if not Oklahoma City, up around 90 degrees this afternoon. 15, 20 degrees warmer than normal today. We'll see some of that warmth continue tomorrow, but places like Cincinnati do take a dip as we go into the second half of the week. 65 degrees on Thursday, back up to 77 degrees, which again is warmer than normal. This mid to late October warmth continues for many spots across the Midwestern states. Dry conditions today across the Southeast. Very nice there. Temperatures in Atlanta at 80 degrees this afternoon. A little cooler into the Pacific Northwest, where temperatures are there in the middle, maybe even some lower 50s. Meanwhile, the tropics continue on. Tropical storm Oscar. It's a weak storm, 40-mile-per-hour tropical storm right now, though it is beginning to move away from the southern Bahamas, and then it'll eventually just weaken as it tracks up to the north and east. Vlad, no concern for the United States right now from Oscar or anything else in the tropics. And at this point, I think everybody's just fine with that.
That's true. I agree with that 100%. Grant Gilmore for us this morning. Thanks, Grant. Okay, testimony in the murder trial of Cash App founder Bob Lee continues in San Francisco. What we can expect in court today, that's coming up. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. New testimony today in the trial for the man accused of killing Cash App founder Bob Lee, and the defendant's sister has been making serious waves with her claims on the witness stand. Lauren Toms is a CBS News Bay Area reporter, and she is following the case from San Francisco and joins me now to talk about this. So, Lauren, remind us again who Bob Lee was and why this case is getting so much national attention.
Yeah, hey there. Bob Lee was known for his role as a tech executive here in Silicon Valley, and he's known for his role in founding the popular money exchange app Cash App, as well for his role in founding JavaScript and Android. And at the time of this stabbing in April of last year, it sent shockwaves through not only San Francisco, experiencing public safety issues at the time, but across the country, as Elon Musk even tweeted about this case, that violent crime in San Francisco was rampant, and at the time he questioned whether city officials were doing enough in this case. Now, an arrest was made 9 days after the stabbing took place, and since then we've learned more details about the tech underworld and the drugs and partying that goes on. We have also learned since the trial began last week about the murder weapon, a 7.5-inch Joseph paring knife that prosecutors say the accused Nima Momeni grabbed from his sister's apartment just minutes before the stabbing. Now, the defense has maintained that their client, Nima Momeni, acted in self-defense and had to stand his ground after they say Bob Lee attacked him in a fit of rage brought on by several days of drug use. They've suggested that it could have been Bob Lee who was holding the murder weapon. Now, the prosecution has painted Nima Momeni as an overprotective brother who was questioning Bob Lee about a potential assault that may have happened at the hands who Bob Lee introduced his sister to just days before all of this took place. Now, we are learning more about drug use that took place in the hours leading up to the stabbing, including cocaine and ketamine, and the potential motive, that alleged assault that once again took place at the hands of a man who Bob Lee introduced Nima Momeni's sister Khazar to, she says, just days before the stabbing.
All right, Lauren Toms reporting for us from the Bay Area. Thank you, Lauren. Really important story. Glad you're on it. The NBA regular season tips off tonight with 2 games as basketball's biggest stars return to the court. Tonight's action will feature the defending champion Boston Celtics taking on the New York Knicks. On the West Coast, the Lakers will take on the Minnesota Timberwolves, and it could be a historic first as LeBron James and his son Bronny might potentially appear on the court together. It would be the first time in NBA history that a father-son played in an NBA regular season game on the same team. The city of brotherly love is getting its own version of the portal. Yeah, that portal that connects residents to other parts of the world. We're going to take you there live after the break. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Sometimes you just want to ditch the phone, right? It just isn't worth it. Case in point, this story out of Australia. These are pictures of a woman being rescued when her arm got stuck between 2 boulders. She was trying, folks, to retrieve her cell phone, which fell between the rocks. Rescue crews had to remove one of the boulders in order to free her. The whole ordeal lasted about 7 hours. The woman escaped with only minor injuries, and no, she didn't even get her phone back. Sometimes just let it go. Just end it, as Timmy says in Seinfeld. Just end it. All right, air travelers will need to speed up their goodbyes at one New Zealand airport. Signs at the Dunedin airport say there is a 3-minute time limit for the last hug before a passenger enters the terminal. Officials say it is meant to keep traffic at the very small terminal under control. Reaction has been, as you might imagine, look at this. It's been mixed to this new rule. People like to hug. It's important that no one is going to get a ticket for a longer embrace, but they may be asked to move it to the parking lot or get a room. Take it outside. Take it outside, folks. No, there should be no limits to hug time. hug time is like, it's the last time you might see somebody. Okay, the city of brotherly love is now connected to other parts of the world. Philadelphia has unveiled its version of the portal this morning. You might remember the portal. The portal, we had it here in New York, right? Didn't go so well. People were doing New York kind of things, like, hey, over here, over there. Like, so let's see what happens in Philly. CBS News' Philadelphia correspondent Marcella Bayeto is in the city's Love Park. That's the name of it, right, Marcella? It's called Love Park, and that's where the portal is connecting people.
Good morning. Yes, we're here live in Love Park. And it's a big day here for a lot of people in Philadelphia. Right behind me, you guys can see the portal. It is live. They have turned it on, and so many people are here to take in this big, big moment. Now, it's a large circular structure that acts as a window into different locations all throughout the world. You can see there are tourists, there are locals from all different parts of Philadelphia here to kind of witness this first of its kind sort of artwork right here. Now, the 24/7 live streaming artwork has been officially turned on, allowing Philadelphia to connect with cities all over. A Lithuanian artist started this whole project back in 2016, and these bi-directional screens have popped up in Ireland, New York City, and in Poland. Every 3 minutes, this live stream will rotate to feature a different city, and then they'll get to interact and have fun. A lot of people have been dancing, waving, obviously holding up signs. Now, one of the leaders on the portal team is a Philadelphia native, so there's ties to this city already. A philanthropist, Martha Snyder is her name. She helped make the Rocky statue a reality here in Philadelphia. She's also part of the team that advocated to bring the portal to Philly. Now, there's no word yet on how long the installation will be sticking around here in the city of Philadelphia, but city officials say they hope to keep it up for as long as possible. They are working to make it a permanent fixture here at Love Park. Now, the hope is that they will connect even more cities, including Brazil and Ethiopia. Now, if we want to zoom in on the camera, too, on the portal, you can see there's a crack at the bottom right there. And according to city officials, this wasn't vandalism. This wasn't intentional. It just happened during the installation process. They are going to hopefully fix it over the next few days. But there is a lot of excitement. People are so excited to be here. And we'll be continuing to check in on just how everybody's reacting to this artwork right behind me.
So I think what's really interesting, Marcella, is that where you are in Philadelphia, there are people, like there appear to be dozens of people. I don't know. It looks like a big crowd of people that are all mugging for the camera or mugging for the portal. Meanwhile, wherever that portal is, I don't know what city it is in right now because you mentioned that they're all rotating. People are there's like 3 people there, but for the most part, people are going about their daily lives because people got stuff to do.
Exactly. Well, I think this one's in. So this one is in Poland, I believe. But, these portals have been in these cities for quite some time. So it's kind of normal for them by this time. It's not that exciting anymore for them, probably. But for here in Philly, I mean, this is an attraction. I have never seen this many people at Love Park for any sort of event. So it is kind of a big moment for us.
So I'll be very curious to see, Marcella, at the end of the day, depending on how long it stays there, because we've always heard here in New York City that we can be sort of rough, but we know that in Philly, I mean, it gets crazy in Philly. So we had some issues here in New York. Keep us up to speed over the next couple of days about how Philly treats the people that are viewing them from all around the world through the portal. It's really interesting stuff. Marcella, thanks so much. Appreciate it. What do you think, Grant? An old Philly welcome for people in Poland?
We'll try to be on our best behavior. We make no promises, though.
You booed Santa Claus, or is that a myth? Is that true? You booed Santa Claus once?
There are rumors that did happen. Yes, yes. So I've heard. Guys, beautiful weather in the Northeast to check out the portal if you're heading to Philly. Otherwise, cooler temperatures up towards the Pacific Northwest. We're going to try to be good. We'll try to be good.
All right, Grant Gilmore, appreciate you, brother. Thank you very much. That does it for me, but stay right where you are. Elizabeth Cook is coming to you live from San Francisco with all the breaking news coast to coast. That's after the break. This is CBS News 24/7.